Christopher Hudson made the worst decision of his life in front of 1,000 witnesses. When the pregnant Omega collapsed at his feet, begging him to claim their child, he called her a liar, called her nothing. He watched them drag her away to die in the winter cold, and told himself it was necessary that an alpha couldn't be tied to packless trash. But he didn't know what he'd just awakened. Didn't know that the broken girl he'd thrown away carried the last silver wolf bloodline in existence. Didn't know that his daughter would be born speaking prophecies and breathing lightning. Now Ruth is coming back. Not as the servant who scrubbed his floors. Not as the desperate Omega, begging for scraps of his affection. She's coming back as a queen, with 3 kings kneeling at her feet. And Christopher is about to learn that some rejections cost you everything. If you want to watch Christopher's world burn for what he did to Ruth, hit that like button right now. Let's make sure everyone sees what happens when you underestimate an Omega. Because trust me, this rejection is about to cost him more than he ever imagined. Chapter 1. The Humiliation. The Grand Tribunal Hall of the Lunar Court smelled of beeswax, old money, and the sharp metallic tang of fear. Ruth Conrad knew that smell well. She'd been smelling it on herself for 3 months now. She knelt on the cold marble floor, a scrub brush clutched in her raw, red hands, trying to make herself invisible. It was a skill she'd perfected over 3 years of servitude. Omegas without packs learned quickly. Be silent, be small, be nothing. But today, being nothing was impossible. Her uniform, a shapeless gray dress meant to hang loose on her small frame, was pulling tight across her middle. She'd tried everything, wearing 2 undershirts, hunching her shoulders, skipping meals she couldn't afford anyway. Nothing worked. The swell of her belly was becoming undeniable. Please, goddess, just let me finish this floor. Just let me get through today. The tribunal hall was filling with nobles for the monthly session where the High Council heard petitions and settled disputes. Ruth kept her head down, scrubbing faster. If she could finish before the session started, she could disappear into the servant corridors for the rest of the day. Ruth, are you deaf as well as useless? The voice cut through the hall like a whip crack. Ruth's hands froze on the brush. Hattie Dickerson stood at the entrance to the hall, resplendent in a gown of deep emerald silk that probably cost more than Ruth would earn in a lifetime. She was the daughter of Council Elder Dickerson, beautiful and cruel in equal measure. Her perfectly painted lips curved into a sneer as she approached. The High Council will be entering in 5 minutes, and you're still slouching around on your knees like a dog. Her heels clicked against the marble with each step. Get up. Get out. Ruth pushed herself to her feet, moving carefully. Everything made her dizzy lately. The room swayed slightly, and she gripped the bucket handle to steady herself. I'm almost finished, Lady Hattie. Just one more. Do I look like I care? Hattie waved a dismissive hand. Leave the bucket. Someone competent will finish it. Ruth nodded, keeping her eyes down. She gathered her supplies with shaking hands, acutely aware that Hattie was still standing there, watching her with an expression that made Ruth's skin crawl. You know, Hattie said, her voice dropping to a conversational purr that was somehow worse than her shouts. You look different lately. Fatter. Have you been stealing food from the kitchens? Ruth's blood turned to ice. No, my lady, I would never. Then why do you look like you've swallowed a watermelon? Hattie stepped closer, her nose wrinkling. And your scent is off. You smell sweet, cloying. Like. Her green eyes widened, the color drained from her perfect face. You're pregnant. The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Ruth felt the world tilt dangerously. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, a protective gesture she couldn't suppress. Please, Lady Hattie. I can explain. Explain? Hattie's voice rose to a shriek that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. You're pregnant? You? A packless Omega who probably spreads her legs for any alpha who looks at her twice? It's not like that, Ruth whispered, tears burning her eyes. Please. Who's the father? Some rogue? A human? A servant? Hattie's laugh was sharp and ugly. Does he know he's stuck his seed in the lowest creature in the court? Before Ruth could answer, the massive doors at the far end of the hall swung open. The council was arriving. Hattie's eyes glittered with malicious glee. Well, this just became much more interesting. Please, Ruth begged, her voice cracking. Please don't. But Hattie was already moving, her silk gown rustling as she swept toward the entering nobles. Ruth stood frozen, her bucket forgotten, as her entire world began to crumble around her. The High Council entered in order of rank. First came the elders, 7 ancient wolves who'd held their positions for decades. Behind them came the territorial alphas, powerful males who ruled their regions with iron fists. And behind them, Ruth's breath caught in her throat, Christopher Hudson. He was magnificent as always. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. His eyes were the color of a storm-gray sea, and right now they were focused straight ahead, not even glancing in her direction. 3 months ago, those eyes had looked at her with something that might have been tenderness. 3 months ago, he'd whispered promises in the dark that she'd been foolish enough to believe. You're different, Ruth. Special. I feel it. This isn't just physical. You have to know that. I'll tell them. Soon. I'll make this right. Lies, all lies. Because 2 weeks after their last night together, Ruth had smelled his scent mingled with Hattie's outside the council chambers. She'd heard Hattie's triumphant laugh and his low murmur of approval. She'd understood then what she'd been to him. A moment of curiosity, a walk on the wild side before he did what was expected, and chose a mate worthy of his status. And now she was carrying his child. The council took their seats at the raised dais. Christopher sat among the territorial alphas, his expression bored as the chief elder, Francis Murphy, called the session to order. Ruth tried to move, to slip toward the servants' entrance, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The dizziness was getting worse. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Before we begin, Hattie's clear voice rang out. I have urgent business that requires the council's immediate attention. Chief Elder Francis raised a bushy eyebrow. Lady Hattie, you're not on today's agenda. This cannot wait. Hattie's smile was venomous. She pointed directly at Ruth. That Omega is pregnant. The hall erupted. Gasps and whispers filled the air like a swarm of wasps. Every eye in the room turned to Ruth. She felt their stares like physical touches, pressing against her, suffocating her. Order! Francis's voice cracked like thunder. The hall fell silent. Is this true? Ruth opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her hand was still pressed to her belly, damning evidence. The Omega will answer the elder, Francis commanded. Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. She tried again, forcing the words out. Yes, elder. I'm pregnant. The whispers started again, louder this time. Ruth saw disgust on face after face. To these nobles, she was already the lowest of the low. A pregnant Omega without a mate was something obscene, a violation of their precious order. Who is the father? Francis demanded. Ruth's eyes found Christopher. He was staring at her now, his expression unreadable. For one desperate moment, she prayed that he would stand up, that he would claim her and their child, that some part of the male who'd held her in the dark and whispered sweet lies had been real. Christopher's jaw tightened. He looked away. I can't say, Ruth whispered. You can't, or you won't. This came from another elder, a female with silver hair and cold blue eyes. He doesn't want to be named, Ruth said, the words tasting like ash. He's made that clear. So you were someone's whore. Hattie's voice dripped with satisfaction. And now you're carrying a bastard child that no one wants. That's enough, Lady Hattie, Francis said, though his tone suggested he agreed with the sentiment. He turned his attention back to Ruth. Do you understand the position this puts the court in? An unmated Omega, pregnant with unknown parentage, living within these walls. I'll leave, Ruth said quickly. I'll go tonight. I won't be a burden. Leave and go where? Another elder, younger than Francis but equally stern, leaned forward. You have no pack. No territory will take you, and winter is coming. You'd be dead within a week. Then what would you have me do? Ruth's voice cracked. The black spots were getting bigger. The room was spinning. The Omega must name the father, Francis declared. If he's a member of this court, he'll be required to claim the child and provide for it, though he's under no obligation to mate with her. If he's not of the court, we'll arrange transport to his territory. But she must name him. And if she refuses? Hattie asked sweetly. Francis's expression hardened. Then she'll be exiled. Tonight, before the first snow falls. The room tilted. Ruth's knees buckled. She heard gasps, felt hands grab at her, but it was too late. The marble floor rushed up to meet her, and then there was nothing but darkness and the faint, fluttering heartbeat that wasn't her own. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was Hattie's delighted laugh, and a voice that might have been Christopher's, saying something she couldn't quite make out. Chapter 2. The Father's Denial. Ruth woke to the smell of antiseptic and the feeling of cool cloth on her forehead. She was lying on something soft, a cot, she realized, in a small room she didn't recognize. Stone walls, a single narrow window showing the gray afternoon sky, and a woman sitting beside her with a basin of water. "Easy now," the woman said. She was older, maybe 50, with kind eyes and the practical clothing of a healer. "You gave everyone quite a scare." Ruth tried to sit up, and the woman gently pushed her back down. "The baby," Ruth gasped, her hand flying to her belly, "is fine, strong heartbeat, but you're malnourished and exhausted." The healer's expression turned sympathetic. "How long have you been skipping meals?" "I don't. I haven't been hungry." A lie. Ruth had been starving herself, trying to hide the pregnancy as long as possible. Every coin she earned went to saving for the inevitable exile. Food had become a luxury she couldn't afford. "Well, you need to eat now. You're growing a life inside you." The healer stood, gathering her supplies. "The council wants to see you as soon as you're awake. I told them you need rest, but..." She trailed off with a meaningful look. Ruth understood. The council's wishes outweighed the health of a nobody Omega. "I'll go now," Ruth said, swinging her legs off the cot. The room spun briefly, then steadied. "At least drink this first." The healer pressed a cup of warm broth into her hands. "You fainted from low blood pressure. Don't make me scrape you off the floor again." Ruth drank obediently, the broth spreading warmth through her empty stomach. It was the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. "Thank you," she whispered. The healer's expression softened. "I had a daughter once, Omega, like you. She stopped, pressing her lips together. "Drink up, and whatever happens in that council chamber, remember, you're stronger than you think." The council had reconvened in a smaller chamber, one Ruth had never been allowed to enter. It was clearly designed for private tribunals. A semicircle of high-backed chairs facing a single wooden stool in the center. No witnesses. No escape. Ruth was escorted in by 2 guards who positioned themselves at the door. The elders sat in their chairs like judges at an execution. The territorial alphas stood behind them, silent observers to whatever was about to happen. Christopher was among them. He stood at the far left, his arms crossed, his face carefully blank. He wouldn't look at her. "Sit," Francis commanded, gesturing to the stool. Ruth sat. The wood was hard and uncomfortable, clearly chosen to put the occupant at a disadvantage. She folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "You fainted during the tribunal," Francis said. "Our healer confirms you are approximately 3 months pregnant. Is this correct?" "Yes, Elder." "And you still refuse to name the father?" Ruth's eyes found Christopher again. He was staring at the wall above her head, his jaw tight. "Say something. Please. Just acknowledge this." "The father has made it clear he wants nothing to do with me or the child," Ruth said carefully. "Naming him would only bring shame to his house." "I won't do that." "How noble." Hattie's voice came from the doorway. Ruth turned to see her enter, still in her green gown, looking fresh and triumphant. "The Omega protects her lover's honor, while carrying his bastard." "Lady Hattie, you were not summoned to this tribunal," Francis said, though he didn't order her to leave. "My apologies, Chief Elder, but I believe I have information relevant to this case." Hattie's smile was sharp as broken glass. She walked into the center of the room, her movements deliberately theatrical. 3 months ago, I noticed something peculiar. Alpha Christopher was keeping unusual hours, disappearing after dark, returning near dawn with his scent, altered. Ruth's heart stopped. Christopher's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands tighten into fists. "That's quite an accusation, Lady Hattie," Francis said slowly. "Is it?" Hattie turned to face Christopher directly. "Tell me, Alpha Christopher, where were you on the night of the harvest moon? The night you told your beta you were hunting alone in the northern woods?" "I was hunting," Christopher said flatly. Strange. Because I saw you leaving the servants' quarters just before dawn. Hattie's eyes glittered, and I followed the scent trail. It led to her room. She pointed at Ruth. The chamber erupted in whispers. Ruth felt the air being crushed from her lungs. Alpha Christopher, Francis said, his voice heavy with warning. Is there truth to this? Christopher was silent for a long moment. Ruth watched hope and despair war inside her chest. If he admitted it, he would be forced to provide for the child. She and the baby would have protection, resources, a chance at survival. But she would also be bound forever to a male who didn't want her, who had used her and discarded her like trash. I did visit the servants' quarters that night, Christopher said finally. Ruth's breath caught. I was conducting an inspection. There had been reports of theft. I questioned several servants, including her. He gestured dismissively at Ruth. It was entirely professional. If Lady Hattie interpreted something more from a brief conversation, that's her mistake. The words hit Ruth like a physical blow. She heard someone make a small, wounded sound and realized it was her. You're lying, she whispered. Every head in the room turned to her. Omegas didn't call alphas liars. Not ever. It was a death sentence. Christopher's eyes finally met hers. They were cold, dead. Excuse me? You're lying, Ruth repeated, louder this time. Tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't care anymore. You weren't inspecting anything. You came to my room. You told me I was special, you said. I said nothing, Christopher interrupted, his voice sharp as a knife. Because nothing happened. You're a delusional Omega who's trying to trap an alpha into claiming a child that probably isn't even his. Who's the real father, Ruth? Some rogue you let into your bed? A human from the village? It's you. Ruth stood up, her hands clenched. You know it's you. You can smell it on me, the bond, the connection. I smell an Omega in heat who'll say anything to avoid exile, Christopher said coldly. He turned to Francis. Chief Elder, I formally deny any involvement with this Omega. I have never touched her. The child she carries is not mine. If she continues to claim otherwise, I'll have no choice but to consider it slander against my house. Ruth's legs gave out. She collapsed back onto the stool, her whole body shaking. This couldn't be happening. He couldn't just erase everything they'd shared. But you said you loved me, she whispered brokenly. I've never loved anything low enough to scrub floors, Christopher said. And the casual cruelty in his voice broke something inside Ruth that she didn't know could break. Hattie was smiling openly now. She moved to stand beside Christopher, placing a possessive hand on his arm. Perhaps this is a good time to make our announcement, darling. Darling, Alpha Christopher and I became engaged last week, Hattie announced to the council. We were waiting for the proper time to inform everyone. But given these accusations, perhaps it's best to be clear about where his loyalties lie. She held up her left hand. A massive diamond caught the light, sending rainbow reflections across the stone walls. Ruth stared at the ring, at Hattie's triumphant face, at Christopher's cold expression. Congratulations, Francis said warmly. This is excellent news. Christopher, your father will be pleased. The union of your houses will strengthen the Eastern Territories considerably. Thank you, Chief Elder, Christopher said. His voice was perfectly steady. If he felt any guilt, any shame, any flicker of recognition for what he was doing, it didn't show. Ruth felt something shifting inside her. Not the baby, something else. Something that had been sleeping, dormant, locked away so deep she'd never known it was there. It stirred in response to her pain, her rage, her absolute despair. They dare, a voice whispered in her mind. It didn't sound like her. It sounded ancient, furious. They dare treat us like nothing. Reject our young. Cast us aside. Ruth gripped the edge of the stool, her nails digging into the wood. Her vision was blurring, but not from tears this time. Everything had a red tinge to it. Given Alpha Christopher's denial, Francis was saying, and his upcoming marriage to Lady Hattie, I see no reason to pursue this matter further. Ruth Conrad, you will leave the court grounds by nightfall. You're banned from returning. If you're found within our territory after sunset, you'll be executed for trespassing. It's winter, someone objected. Ruth couldn't see who threw the red haze. She's pregnant. That's a death sentence. Then perhaps she should have thought of that before opening her legs, Hattie said sweetly. The thing inside, Ruth growled. It wasn't a sound she made consciously. It came from somewhere deep in her chest, vibrating through her bones. It sounded nothing like an Omega's whimper. It sounded like a predator. Everyone in the room froze. Christopher's eyes widened. For the first time, Ruth saw something other than cold dismissal in them. She saw shock. And underneath that, the smallest flicker of fear. Did she just... One of the elders began. Impossible, another whispered. She's wolfless, the report said. Ruth's back arched. Pain lanced through her spine, white-hot and excruciating. She tried to scream, but what came out was another growl, deeper this time. More resonant. Her hands gripped the stool. The wood cracked under her fingers. Something's wrong. Francis stood up, his chair scraping against stone. Guards. Restrain her before. Too late. Ruth's fingernails extended into claws, silver and gleaming. Her teeth lengthened. Her eyes, she couldn't see them, but she felt them change, felt power flood through pupils that had been violet since birth. The baby kicked. Hard. And with that kick came a surge of protective rage so fierce, so absolute, that Ruth lost all sense of who she was and what was happening. All she knew was that they had threatened her child, and she would burn them all to ash before she let them take it from her. Ruth opened her mouth and roared. Every window in the chamber exploded outward in a shower of glass. Chapter 3. The Trial of Shame. The explosion of glass brought guards running from every corner of the court. They burst through the chamber doors with weapons drawn, expecting to find an attack. An assassination attempt. Something that made sense. Instead, they found Ruth Conrad on her hands and knees in the center of the room, surrounded by shattered glass, her body racked with tremors as silver claws retracted back into human fingernails. What in the goddess's name? One guard began. Contain her, Francis commanded, his voice shaking. The chief elder had pressed himself against the far wall, as far from Ruth as the room would allow. The other elders looked equally terrified. Get chains. Silver-reinforced chains, now. Ruth couldn't speak. Her throat felt raw, as if she'd been screaming for hours. The rage that had flooded through her was receding, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that made her bones feel like water. But the voice in her head was still there. Still growling. Get up. Protect our young. Get up. I can't. Ruth whispered to the voice, to herself, to the baby flutter kicking inside her. I'm too weak. I'm nobody. I'm no. You are mine, the voice snarled. And they will learn what that means. 4 guards hauled Ruth to her feet. Her legs wouldn't support her weight, so they dragged her, her feet scraping against broken glass and polished stone. She felt blood, warm and sticky, trailing behind her. Take her to the holding cells, Francis ordered. We need to consult the ancient texts, find out what we're dealing with. She's wolfless. One of the alphas protested. Every test we've done since she arrived 3 years ago confirmed it. She has no wolf. This must be some kind of spell, some dark magic. Magic doesn't give you claws. Another alpha snapped. He was staring at the gouges Ruth's fingers had left in the wooden stool. They were deep, carved through solid oak like it was butter. That was transformation, partial transformation. Christopher hadn't moved. He stood frozen, staring at Ruth with an expression she couldn't read. His face had gone pale beneath his tan. Hattie, on the other hand, looked furious. Her perfect composure had cracked, revealing the ugly fear underneath. She's dangerous, unstable. She should be executed immediately, before whatever's inside her fully wakes up. We can't execute a pregnant Omega, one of the female elders said sharply. That violates every law we have. The innocent child. The child is probably a monster too, Hattie shrieked. Can't you see? She's been hiding this, pretending to be weak and pathetic while carrying some kind of abomination inside her. Enough. Francis's voice cracked like a whip. Until we understand what we're dealing with, the Omega will be confined. No visitors. No food until the healers determine it's safe, and someone get the keeper of records. I want every text on dormant bloodlines brought to my office within the hour. The guards dragged Ruth toward the door. As they passed Christopher, Ruth lifted her head with the last of her strength. "You did this," she whispered. "You rejected us. You rejected your child. And when she's born." Ruth felt her lips pull back from her teeth in something that wasn't quite a smile. "She's going to ask about her father. And I'm going to tell her exactly what kind of male you are." Christopher flinched as if she'd struck him. Then the doors closed, and Ruth was dragged down into the darkness of the holding cells. The cells beneath the court were older than the building above, carved from living rock during the first wars between packs. They smelled of damp stone, rust, and the accumulated despair of centuries. Ruth was thrown into the largest cell, the one usually reserved for rabid wolves awaiting execution. The bars were solid silver, and when the guards locked them, Ruth felt a burning sensation even from 3 feet away. Silver poisoning. The weakness it caused in werewolves was legendary, but Ruth had never shifted, had never felt silver's bite. Until now. She crawled to the back corner of the cell, as far from the bars as she could get, and curled into a ball. Her feet were bleeding from the broken glass. Her wrists were bruised from the guard's grip. Her whole body ached with the aftermath of whatever had tried to emerge. "Sleep," the voice in her head murmured, gentler now. "You need strength. We both do." "Who are you?" Ruth whispered into the darkness. "You know who I am. You've always known. They just made you forget. I don't understand." "You will. Sleep now, little mother. Tomorrow, they come for answers, and we will give them fear instead." Ruth wanted to argue, to demand explanations, but exhaustion pulled her under like a riptide. Her last conscious thought was of the baby, safe and warm in her belly, blissfully unaware of the hell waiting outside. She dreamed of silver moonlight and ancient forests, of a female wolf larger than any alpha, standing over a den of pups with eyes that glowed like molten gold. The wolf turned to look at Ruth, and Ruth realized she was looking at herself. "We are coming," the wolf said. "And they are not ready." Ruth woke to the sound of voices arguing outside her cell. "Absolutely insane. You can't put her on trial. She's barely conscious. The council has made their decision. If she's a threat, we need to know. And the only way to know is to test her." Ruth opened her eyes. Torchlight flickered through the bars, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. She could see figures moving in the corridor beyond. Test her how? By torturing a pregnant Omega? Have we lost all sense of decency? That voice was familiar. Ruth pushed herself up on trembling arms and squinted at the speakers. One was a guard she didn't recognize. The other was the healer who treated her earlier. The woman was red-faced with anger, jabbing a finger at the guard's chest. "I don't make the rules, healer. I just follow orders." The guard sounded tired. Apologetic, even. "The trial begins at dawn. She's to be brought before the full court. She can barely walk. Then we'll carry her." The guard's voice hardened. "Those are the chief elder's orders. If you have a problem with them, take it up with him." The healer made a sound of pure frustration. She turned toward Ruth's cell, and their eyes met through the bars. "I'm sorry," the healer mouthed silently. Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing away down the corridor. The guard remained. He stood outside Ruth's cell, close enough that she could see his face clearly now. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I don't think you're a monster." Ruth laughed. It came out bitter and broken. "You're the only one. My sister was an Omega. She died in childbirth because the pack healer refused to treat her properly. Said she wasn't worth the herbs." The guard's hands tightened on his spear. "So when I see them treating you like garbage while you're carrying a child, it makes me sick." "Then help me escape," Ruth said, pushing herself to her feet. The cell spun briefly, then steadied. "Please. I'll die out there in the winter, but at least I'll die free. At least I'll have a chance." "I can't." The guard's expression was genuinely pained. "I have a family. If I helped you escape, they'd execute me. And then who'd provide for them?" Ruth nodded slowly. She understood. Survival made cowards of everyone eventually. "Can you at least tell me what kind of trial awaits me?" The guard hesitated, then glanced down the corridor. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. They're calling it a trial of origin. They want to determine what bloodline you carry, what you are. How? Pain. The guard's jaw tightened. They're going to hurt you. Push you to transform. Force whatever's inside you to emerge, so they can see it clearly. Ruth's hand moved to her belly. And the baby? The guard looked away. That was answer enough. They're going to kill us, Ruth whispered. Not kill. But if the baby doesn't survive the trial. The guard's voice trailed off. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He turned and walked away before Ruth could respond. She stood alone in the cell, one hand pressed to her belly, feeling the steady flutter kick of the life inside her. I won't let them hurt you, Ruth whispered to her daughter. She didn't know how she knew the baby was a girl, but she was certain, as certain as she was, that the child had silver eyes and would be born with power in her blood. I promise. Whatever they do to me, I won't let them touch you. You can't stop them alone, the voice in her head said. Then what do I do? Let me out. Fully. Completely. Stop fighting me. I don't know how. Yes, you do. When they hurt us tomorrow, when they threaten our daughter, you'll know. The seal is already cracking. One more blow, and I'll be free. And then what? You kill everyone in the court? That makes us a monster. That makes them write about us. No, the voice growled. It makes us a mother. And there is nothing more dangerous in this world than a mother protecting her young. Ruth slid down the wall, exhaustion pulling at her again. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she started to drift, she saw Christopher's cold face, heard Hattie's mocking laughter, felt the impact of her body hitting the marble floor. They'd taken everything from her. Her dignity, her hope, even the male she'd foolishly thought might love her. But they hadn't taken her child. Not yet. Somewhere above. A clock chimed midnight. 6 hours until dawn. 6 hours until the trial. Ruth pressed both hands to her belly and felt her daughter kick in response. I'm going to name you Serafina, Ruth whispered into the darkness. It means burning ones. Because that's what we're going to do, baby girl. We're going to burn so bright they'll never forget us. Another kick. Stronger this time. And deep inside Ruth's chest, behind the walls of flesh and bone and 3 years of learned helplessness, something ancient and furious smiled with too many teeth. Yes, the silver wolf purred. Let them light the match. We'll show them what fire really looks like. In the corridor outside, the torches flickered and dimmed. And somewhere in the court above, Christopher Hudson woke from a nightmare of silver eyes and burning flesh. His hand pressed to his chest where his heart was racing like he'd run a mile. He told himself it was nothing. But deep down, in the part of him that was still wolf, still wild, he knew better. The storm was coming, and he'd been the one to summon it. Chapter 4. The Transformation. Dawn broke cold and merciless over the lunar court. Ruth was dragged from her cell by 4 guards, not the sympathetic young one from the night before, but older males with faces like carved stone. They didn't speak to her, didn't look at her. They simply hauled her up the winding stairs and through corridors she'd once cleaned, leaving a trail of blood from her torn feet. She'd tried to stand on her own. Her legs had given out after 3 steps. The Grand Tribunal Hall had been transformed overnight. The wooden stool was gone, replaced by a metal chair bolted to the floor. Chains hung from its arms and legs, glinting silver in the morning light. Around the perimeter of the hall stood at least 100 witnesses, alphas, betas, high-ranking omegas, and their families. This wasn't a private tribunal anymore. This was a spectacle. Francis stood at the center of the dais, flanked by the other 6 elders. Before him sat a collection of ancient texts, their leather bindings cracked with age. To his right stood a male, Ruth didn't recognize, thin and elderly, with white hair hanging to his shoulders and eyes that were clouded with cataracts. The keeper of records, one guard murmured to another as they forced Ruth into the chair. The silver chains burned when they locked around her wrists and ankles. Ruth bit back a scream, tasting blood as her teeth cut into her lip. The metal seared her skin, raising immediate blisters. The trial of origin will now commence, Francis announced, his voice carrying through the hall with supernatural clarity. Ruth Conrad, Omega of Nopak, stands accused of harboring dangerous bloodline magic while concealing her true nature from this court. I didn't conceal anything, Ruth gasped, her voice weak. I didn't know. Silence. Francis didn't raise his voice, but the command hit like a physical blow. Ruth's jaw snapped shut against her will. Alpha compulsion. She'd always been susceptible to it, being wolfless. You will speak only when questioned directly. The keeper of records stepped forward, his movements stiff with age. He circled Ruth slowly, studying her with those milky eyes that somehow saw too much. Interesting, he murmured. Very interesting. The scent is there, buried deep but unmistakable, moon-blessed, ancient. He paused in front of her, so close Ruth could smell the parchment and dust that clung to his robes. Tell me, girl, what do you know of your parentage? Francis nodded. Ruth felt the compulsion release enough for her to speak. Nothing, she whispered. I was found as an infant, abandoned in the northern forests. The court took me in out of charity. Charity. The keeper's laugh was dry as dead leaves. Is that what they told you? He turned to Francis. She has no memory of the purge then. No knowledge of what was done to her bloodline. What purge? Ruth asked, her voice cracking. What are you talking about? The keeper looked at Francis, waiting. The chief elder's expression was troubled, but he nodded permission. 20 years ago, the keeper said, pacing slowly. There was a war, not between packs, but within the werewolf world itself. A faction called the Pure Blood Movement rose to power. They believed that certain bloodlines had become too powerful, too dangerous, that the old magic needed to be contained. Ruth's heart was pounding. The baby kicked frantically, sensing her distress. One bloodline in particular was targeted for extinction. The Argentum line, the Silver Wolves. The keeper stopped pacing. They were the original ruling class of our kind, born with abilities that made even the strongest alphas look like pups. They could command lightning, compel obedience from any wolf regardless of rank, and their bite could either grant immortality or inflict a death so terrible. He trailed off, shaking his head. The pure bloods hunted them systematically, killed every adult, every child, every pregnant female carrying silver blood. The hall was silent except for Ruth's ragged breathing. Except one, the keeper continued. A single infant survived. A female child who was hidden, her bloodline sealed with ancient magic to protect her, to keep her wolf dormant until she was strong enough to survive the attention her awakening would bring. His clouded eyes fixed on Ruth. That child was you. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. No, Ruth whispered. I'm nobody. I'm just an omega. I can't even shift. You couldn't shift, the keeper corrected. The seal prevented it. But seals can break, particularly under extreme emotional trauma. He glanced at Christopher, who stood among the alphas with Hattie at his side. Tell me, Alpha Christopher, when you rejected this omega and her child, did you notice anything unusual? Christopher's jaw tightened. I didn't reject anyone. I never touched her. Liar. The word came from Ruth before she could stop it. The silver chains burned hotter, punishment for speaking out of turn. But she didn't care anymore. You're a liar and a coward, and our daughter is going to know exactly what you are. Your daughter? Hattie's voice was sharp with mockery. You don't even know if it's a girl. You're just a delusional. She's a girl. Ruth's voice was utterly certain. Her name is Seraphina. And she has silver eyes, just like me. Just like my bloodline. Just like the wolf you're all so terrified of. The keeper smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. So the child already speaks to you. Remarkable. The connection between a silver wolf mother and her offspring is legendary. They share power even in the womb. This is insane, one of the alphas muttered. We're listening to fairy tales. Then let's test them, Francis said grimly. He gestured to the guards. Proceed with the trial. Ruth didn't understand what he meant until she saw what one guard was holding. A silver rod, heated until it glowed red-orange. No, Ruth breathed. Please, goddess, no. The trial of origin requires proof, Francis said. His expression was regretful but inflexible. If you truly carry silver wolf blood, your body will heal from silver burns within minutes. If you're simply a damaged omega, experiencing a psychotic break, the wounds will fester and kill you slowly. He paused. Either way, we'll have our answer. And the baby? Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. What about my baby? Francis said nothing. That was answer enough. The guard approached with the heated rod. Ruth could feel the heat radiating from it, could smell the metallic tang of burning silver. She pulled against the chains, ignoring the agony as they seared deeper into her wrists. Please, she begged, abandoning all pride. Please don't do this. I'll leave. I'll go into the winter. I'll die quietly somewhere and never bother any of you again. Just don't hurt my baby, please. The guard hesitated, looking to Francis for confirmation. Do it, Francis commanded. The guard pressed the rod against Ruth's forearm. The pain was unlike anything Ruth had ever experienced. It wasn't just physical, it was soul deep, as if the silver was burning away the very essence of what she was. She screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. And inside her, Serafina screamed too. Ruth felt her daughter's terror and pain transmitted through their connection. The baby was thrashing, panicking, tiny fists pounding against Ruth's womb as if trying to fight their way out to protect her mother. No, Ruth thought desperately. No, baby, stay inside, stay safe. I can take this, I can. The guard removed the rod. Ruth's arm was a ruin of blackened, blistered flesh. The smell of burnt meat filled the hall. Several witnesses gagged. Watch the wound, the keeper commanded. If she's truly Argentum, it will heal within 5 minutes. They waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. The wound wasn't healing. If anything, it was getting worse. The blackened flesh spreading up her arm like poison. She's dying, someone whispered. Hattie laughed, high and cruel. So much for the legendary silver wolf. She's just a broken omega after all. 4 minutes. Ruth's vision was graying at the edges. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, struggling. The baby's movements were becoming weaker. Let me out, the voice in her head snarled. Let me out, or we both die. I don't know how, Ruth whispered through cracked lips. Yes, you do. Stop being afraid. Stop being small. Take what's yours. 5 minutes. She's gone, Francis said quietly. The wound is fatal. She's not. The blackened flesh on Ruth's arm rippled. Silver light, bright as lightning, traced through the burnt tissue. The crowd gasped as the damaged skin began to knit itself back together. Not slowly, not gradually. In seconds, smooth, unmarked skin replaced the horror of moments before. Impossible, someone breathed. But Ruth wasn't finished. The silver light spread from her arm to her chest, to her face, to her legs. It flowed through her like liquid starlight. The chains around her wrists and ankles began to glow, heating rapidly. Stop her! Francis shouted. Reinforce the chains. Too late. The chains shattered, exploding outward in a spray of molten silver droplets. Ruth rose from the chair, her body moving without conscious thought. Her eyes were no longer violet. They were pure molten gold, and she wasn't alone. Behind her, visible only as a shimmer in the air, stood the outline of something massive, something with 4 legs and teeth like sabers and eyes that matched Ruth's exactly. The silver wolf. You wanted to see what I am? Ruth's voice echoed strangely, as if 2 people were speaking in perfect unison, one human, one definitely not. She raised her hand. Her fingernails extended into silver claws 6 inches long. You hurt me. You rejected my child. You tried to murder us both. Ruth took a step forward. The stone beneath her bare feet cracked. And now you want to see the monster you've created? Another step. The shimmer behind her was becoming more solid, taking shape. Run, Ruth whispered. Then her back arched, bones cracking and reforming, and she threw back her head and screamed. But it wasn't a human scream. It was a howl that shook the foundations of the building, that shattered every remaining window, that sent half the witnesses fleeing for the doors in blind panic. Christopher stood frozen, watching in absolute horror as Ruth's body exploded into transformation. Fur the color of fresh snow burst through her skin, her face elongated into a muzzle filled with teeth like daggers. Her body expanded, growing, rising, until she stood nearly 8 feet tall at the shoulder. The silver wolf had emerged, and she was pregnant, her swollen belly prominent even in wolf form, protected by a layer of luminescent fur that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. She turned her massive head toward Christopher. Her golden eyes found his. Mine, she growled, and the word reverberated through every wolf's mind in the hall. You rejected mine, she lunged. Chapter 5. The Silver King's Claim. Christopher barely had time to shift. His wolf burst through his skin in a desperate, graceless transformation driven by pure survival instinct. His midnight black form was large for an alpha, 6 feet at the shoulder, muscled and battle-scarred. Under any normal circumstances, he would have been the most dangerous predator in the room, but there was nothing normal about the silver beast bearing down on him. Ruth, or the thing Ruth had become, was nearly a third larger than him, and the power radiating from her made his wolf want to tuck tail and submit. Every instinct screamed at him to roll over, expose his throat, beg for mercy. Instead, he did the stupidest thing possible. He attacked. Christopher launched himself at her throat, aiming for the killing bite every alpha was trained to execute. His jaws closed on nothing but air, as Ruth twisted with impossible speed, her pregnant belly swinging safely out of reach. Her claws raked across his side, opening 4 deep furrows that sprayed blood across the marble floor. Christopher yelped, scrambling away. The wounds burned not just pain but something worse. Silver poisoning, transmitted through her claws. The hall had erupted into chaos. Witnesses were stampeding toward the exits. Guards were trying to form a defensive line, but their hands shook too badly to hold their weapons steady. The elders had retreated to the far wall, Francis shouting orders that no one could hear over the screaming. Ruth stalked toward Christopher, her lips pulled back from fangs that were longer than a man's fingers. His blood dripped from her claws. Her golden eyes held an intelligence that was terrifying in its clarity. She wasn't mindless with rage. She knew exactly what she was doing. You rejected us. Her voice thundered through Christopher's mind, through every wolf's mind in the hall. You denied our child. You called us nothing. Christopher tried to back away, but his hind leg gave out, the silver poisoning spreading faster than it should. He collapsed, panting, his vision blurring. Now you are nothing, Ruth's wolf snarled. And we will make sure you remember that every day you live. She raised a massive paw, claws extended. Christopher closed his eyes, waiting for the killing blow. It didn't come. Instead, a voice rang out deep, commanding and utterly calm. That's enough. The words carried a weight that made every wolf in the hall freeze, including Ruth. It wasn't compulsion, not exactly. It was something older, something that spoke to the most primitive part of their nature. Christopher forced his eyes open. A man stood in the doorway of the hall. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that made everyone else in the room seem smaller by comparison. His hair was dark, shot through with silver at the temples. His eyes were an unusual shade of amber that seemed to glow in the dim light. He wore traveling clothes, simple black leather and wool, but carried himself like royalty. More importantly, the aura rolling off him made Francis's alpha dominance feel like a candle next to a bonfire. Who are you? Francis demanded, though his voice shook. This is a private tribunal. You have no right. I am Travis Foster, the stranger said, his voice cutting through Francis's protests like a hot knife through butter. Alpha King of the Northern Territories, bloodline keeper of the old ways, and guardian of the Argentum line. He walked into the hall with measured steps, seemingly unconcerned by the massive silver wolf standing over Christopher's bleeding form. His eyes were fixed on Ruth. And that wolf, Travis continued, stopping 10 feet from Ruth, belongs to me. Ruth's massive head swung toward him. Her lips pulled back in a warning snarl that would have sent any sane person running. Travis didn't flinch. He held her gaze steadily. You know me, he said softly. Somewhere deep inside, past the rage and the pain. You know my scent. You know what I am. Ruth took a step toward him, her claws clicking on the stone. Christopher watched in disbelief as the murderous intent in her posture shifted to something else. Confusion. Recognition. Who are you? Ruth's mental voice was less aggressive now, more questioning. I'm the one who sealed your bloodline 20 years ago, Travis said. I'm the one who hid you from the purebloods. I'm the one who's been searching for you since the seal broke 3 days ago. He took a careful step closer. And I'm the only one in this building who can help you right now. Ruth's massive form was trembling. Christopher could see the effort it was taking her to maintain the transformation. She was still new to this, still learning. and the pregnancy was draining her strength faster than she could replenish it. Your daughter, Travis said gently. Serafina. She needs you to shift back. The transformation is putting stress on her. I can hear her heartbeat from here, it's too fast. She's frightened. That got through. Ruth's golden eyes widened, and she looked down at her swollen belly. A whimper escaped her throat, a sound of pure maternal distress. Let me help you, Travis said. Shift back. I'll protect you. I swear it on my bloodline and the moon herself. For a long moment, Ruth didn't move. Then, slowly, the massive wolf began to shimmer and shrink. The transformation reversed, bones cracking and reforming, fur retracting. In seconds, Ruth stood on two human legs again. Naked and shaking, her arms wrapped protectively around her pregnant belly. Travis was already moving, shrugging off his long coat and draping it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, hanging nearly to her knees. I've got you, he murmured, steadying her as her legs threatened to give out. You're safe now. The baby, Ruth gasped, is fine. Strong heartbeat. She's a fighter, like her mother. Travis's hand moved to Ruth's belly, and a soft golden glow emanated from his palm. Ruth's eyes widened as warmth spread through her, soothing the aches and exhaustion. There. That should help. Christopher finally managed to shift back to human form. He lay on the cold floor, clutching his bleeding side, staring at the scene before him with growing horror. Travis Foster. The Alpha King of the North, the most powerful wolf on the continent, and he was touching Ruth like she belonged to him. Get your hands off her, Christopher heard himself say. His voice came out weak, pathetic. She's a member of this court. You have no authority. Authority? Travis's head turned, and the look he gave Christopher could have frozen fire. You rejected her. You denied your own child. You ordered her exile while she was pregnant. You have no authority over anything that concerns her. The child isn't mine, Christopher said, the lie coming automatically. She's delusional. Travis's laugh was sharp and humorless. You can lie to yourself if you want, pup. But I can smell your scent all over her. Faded now, but still there. You bred her, and then you threw her away like trash. He looked around the hall with undisguised contempt. All of you. You had a silver wolf living among you for 3 years, and you treated her like a servant, like nothing. Francis stepped forward, trying to reclaim some control. King Travis, we had no way of knowing. The seal. The seal was placed by me. To protect her from people exactly like you. Travis interrupted. The purebloods wanted her dead because they feared her power. But you? You're worse. You had no idea what she was, and you abused her anyway. Just because you could. We demand answers, Francis said, drawing himself up. By what right do you claim this Omega? What is your relationship to her? Travis was quiet for a moment, his hand still resting protectively on Ruth's shoulder. When he spoke, his voice carried through the hall with absolute authority. Ruth Conrad is not her real name. It's a false identity I gave her when I placed her here as an infant. Travis's amber eyes swept the assembled crowd. Her true name is Ruth Argentum, last living heir of the Silver Wolf bloodline. And according to the old laws that your court still recognizes, she is my ward. Gasps rippled through the witnesses who hadn't fled. Your ward? Francis repeated carefully. When the purebloods massacred her family, I made an oath to her dying mother, my sister by blood, that I would protect her daughter until she came of age and could claim her birthright. Travis's expression hardened. That birthright includes territories spanning half this continent, lands that your court borders, lands that, legally speaking, you've been occupying without permission for the past 20 years. The implications hit like a thunderbolt. If Ruth was the true heir to the Argentum territories, she outranked everyone in this room, including Francis. This is unprecedented, Francis sputtered. We would need to verify these claims, consult the records. The keeper of records is standing right there, Travis said, gesturing to the elderly male who'd been observing everything with those clouded eyes. Ask him. All eyes turned to the keeper. The old male was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The bloodline markers match, he said. The scent, the coloring of her wolf, the healing ability. She is Argentum. And if King Travis was named guardian by blood oath, his claim supersedes any authority this court has. But she's pregnant, Hattie spoke up, her voice shrill with desperation. With a bastard child. That disqualifies her from any noble bloodline. On the contrary, Travis said coldly. In the old laws, a child born to a silver wolf is considered sacred, regardless of the circumstances of conception. If anything, the fact that your alpha, he glanced at Christopher with pure contempt, tried to deny his own child, makes him unfit for his position, not her. Christopher felt the eyes of the entire court turn toward him. Judgment, condemnation, fear. He'd rejected the most powerful bloodline in werewolf history. And now that bloodline had a protector who could destroy his entire territory without breaking a sweat. King Travis, Francis said carefully, perhaps we could discuss this privately. Come to some arrangement. There's nothing to discuss, Travis said flatly. Ruth and her child are leaving with me, today, now. Anyone who tries to stop us will be considered an enemy of the Northern Territories, and I will respond accordingly. His tone made it clear what respond accordingly meant. War. Ruth had been silent through all of this, leaning heavily against Travis, her arms still wrapped around her belly. Now she lifted her head, her violet eyes back to their normal color but still carrying flecks of gold, finding Christopher across the hall. I loved you, she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse from screaming but steady. I would have given you everything. Been anything you needed. And you threw it away because I wasn't good enough for your precious reputation. Christopher opened his mouth, but no words came. What could he possibly say? Our daughter will never know you, Ruth continued. She'll never carry your name. And when she asks about her father, I'll tell her the truth, that he was a coward who valued his pride more than his own blood. She turned away from him then, dismissing him as thoroughly as he'd once dismissed her. I'm ready to go, she told Travis. Travis nodded. He swept Ruth up into his arms, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. She didn't protest, simply rested her head against his shoulder with a sigh of exhaustion. One more thing, Travis said, pausing at the doorway. He looked back at Francis and the assembled court. Ruth's transformation was triggered by extreme trauma. Rejection, abuse, an attempt on her life, and the life of her unborn child. His eyes blazed with barely contained fury. If I find out any of you were directly responsible for that trauma, if I discover that you laid hands on her, hurt her, or threatened her. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The temperature in the hall dropped 10 degrees, and several witnesses felt their wolves cower in pure instinctual terror. Then Travis was gone, carrying Ruth out into the cold morning, leaving behind a hall full of shocked, terrified wolves. And one bleeding alpha who'd just realized he'd made the worst mistake of his entire life. Chapter 6, Labor and Lightning. The northern citadel was carved into the side of a mountain, built from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ruth had fallen asleep during the journey, exhausted from the transformation and the trial. She woke now in a room that was warm, comfortable, and utterly foreign. The bed beneath her was soft, covered in furs that must have cost a fortune. A fire crackled in a massive hearth. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see snow-capped peaks stretching to the horizon, painted orange and pink by the setting sun. She'd lost an entire day. Ruth pushed herself upright, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. Serafina kicked immediately, strong and reassuring. Easy, a female voice said from the corner. You need rest. Ruth turned to find a woman sitting in a chair by the fire. She was middle-aged, with gray-streaked brown hair and kind eyes. She wore the simple clothing of a healer. Where am I? Ruth asked, though she already knew the answer. The northern citadel. King Travis's personal residence. The healer stood, approaching the bed with a tray of food. I'm Lola Richardson, head healer. His Majesty asked me to check on you when you woke. Ruth stared at the food, real food, not the scraps she'd survived on at the court. Fresh bread, roasted meat, fruit, her stomach cramped with hunger. Eat, Lola said gently, setting the tray on Ruth's lap. You're severely malnourished. It's a miracle the baby is as healthy as she is. You know it's a girl? Ruth asked, tearing into the bread. King Travis told me. Lola smiled. He has a gift for sensing such things. Said her heartbeat has a particular rhythm. She paused. He also said you named her Serafina. It's beautiful. Ruth nodded, unable to speak around the food she was shoving into her mouth. She felt like she hadn't eaten in weeks. Maybe she hadn't, not properly. Slow down, Lola cautioned. Your stomach has shrunk. If you eat too fast, you'll just bring it back up. Ruth forced herself to take smaller bites, but it was torture. The baby was kicking frantically, as if she could taste the food too and was demanding more. How long until she's born? Ruth asked between mouthfuls. Lola's expression turned serious. That's what I need to discuss with you. May I examine you? Ruth nodded, setting the tray aside. Lola's hands were gentle as she pressed against Ruth's belly, feeling the baby's position. Her eyes began to glow faintly healer's sight, the ability to see inside a patient's body. After a moment, Lola sat back, her expression troubled. What? Ruth asked, fear spiking through her. What's wrong? Is she hurt? She's not hurt. Lola chose her words carefully. She's more developed than she should be. Much more. Based on your dates, you should be 3 months pregnant. But your daughter has the size and development of a 7-month fetus. Ruth's hand flew to her belly. How is that possible? Silver wolf pregnancies are accelerated, Lola explained. It's one of the characteristics of your bloodline. The legends say it's because your children are born carrying so much power they can't gestate for a normal term or they'd drain the mother completely. She met Ruth's eyes. At this rate, you'll give birth within the week. A week? Ruth whispered. She wasn't ready. She had no supplies, no preparations, no idea how to be a mother. There's more, Lola said quietly. The baby is carrying an enormous amount of magical energy. I can see it pulsing through her even now. When she's born. Lola trailed off, clearly trying to find the right words. What? Ruth demanded. Tell me. Silver wolf births are dangerous. Not just for the mother but for everyone nearby. The release of energy when the child enters the world can be explosive. Literally. Lola's expression was grave. King Travis has ordered the citadel evacuated. Everyone except essential staff will be moved to the valley settlements. The birth chamber is being reinforced with magical wards. But even so, people could die. Ruth finished. Lola nodded. I won't lie to you. This will be the most dangerous birth I've ever attended. But I've delivered 3 silver wolf babies in my lifetime. I know what to expect. And King Travis will be here. His power can help contain yours during the labor. Ruth felt tears burning her eyes. I'm going to hurt people. Just by giving birth. You're going to bring a miracle into this world, Lola interrupted firmly. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, we're taking precautions. But Ruth, your daughter is special. More special than you realize. The amount of power she's carrying. Lola's voice filled with something like awe. I've never seen anything like it. She's going to change everything. Before Ruth could respond, pain lanced through her belly. Not a kick, something else. Something that felt like her insides were being twisted. She gasped. Doubling over. What is it? Lola asked urgently. Ruth, talk to me. Hurts. Ruth managed. The pain was intensifying, spreading from her belly up her spine. Something's wrong. Another wave of pain, stronger this time. Ruth screamed, her back arching. And then she felt it. Wetness. Sudden and warm. Soaking through her nightgown. No, Ruth whispered, looking down at the growing stain. No, it's too soon. It's not too soon, Lola said, her voice suddenly all business. She was already moving, pulling back the furs, examining Ruth. Your water just broke. Ruth, you're in labor. But you said a week. I said, at this rate. The stress from yesterday, the transformation, the trial, everything you went through, it triggered early labor. Lola was moving fast now, pulling supplies from a bag Ruth hadn't noticed. I need to get you to the birthing chamber. Can you walk? Ruth tried to stand. Her legs gave out immediately as another contraction hit, this one so powerful she saw stars. Guards! Lola shouted. I need help. Now. The door burst open. 2 guards rushed in, took one look at Ruth, and their eyes widened. "Get King Travis," one said to the other. "Tell him it's happening." "No time," Lola snapped. "Help me get her to the chamber." "Move." They lifted Ruth between them, carrying her down corridors that blurred together in Ruth's pain-hazed vision. She was dimly aware of people running, shouting, the citadel erupting into organized chaos. The birthing chamber was circular, carved from solid obsidian. The walls were covered in glowing runes that pulsed with protective magic. In the center was a large bed, already prepared with clean linens. They laid Ruth down carefully. Another contraction hit immediately, and this time when she screamed, the lights flickered. "The wards are holding," someone said, "but barely." "Where is King Travis?" Lola demanded, her hands working quickly to check Ruth's progress. "She's already dilating. This is happening fast, too fast." "I'm here." Travis's voice cut through the chaos. He strode into the chamber, still wearing his travel clothes, his amber eyes blazing with power. Everyone out except the healer. Now, the guards fled. The door slammed shut, and suddenly the chamber felt smaller, more intimate. Travis knelt beside the bed, his hand finding Ruth's. "Breathe," he commanded. "Look at me. Breathe." Ruth locked eyes with him, gasping. Another contraction was building, a tsunami of pain that made the previous ones feel like nothing. "It hurts," she sobbed. "It hurts so much." "I know, but you're strong. You survived 3 years in that hell. You transformed for the first time while pregnant. You can do this." His hand tightened on hers. "Ruth, I need you to listen carefully. Your wolf is going to try to emerge during the birth. It's instinct she wants to protect Serafina during the most vulnerable moment. But if she fully transforms while you're in labor, the baby will die." "What?" Ruth's eyes widened in horror. "You have to keep her contained," Travis said. "No matter how much it hurts, no matter what happens, you cannot let her out. Can you do that?" Ruth wanted to say yes, wanted to be brave. But another contraction hit, and this time it felt like her spine was being ripped apart. She felt her teeth lengthening, felt claws trying to emerge from her fingernails. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't control it." Travis pressed his free hand to her forehead. Golden light flowed from his palm into her, and Ruth felt the wolf inside her settle slightly, still growling but contained. "I'll help you," Travis said. "But you have to fight her. For Serafina's sake, you have to fight." "Another contraction coming," Lola announced from between Ruth's legs. "This one's going to be big. Ruth, when I tell you, I need you to push. Understand?" Ruth nodded, tears streaming down her face. The pain was building again, worse than before, a mountain of agony that seemed impossible to survive. "Now," Lola commanded, "push." Ruth bore down with everything she had. The pain exploded into something beyond description. She heard herself screaming, heard glass shattering somewhere, felt electricity crackling across her skin. Outside the chamber, lightning struck the citadel's highest tower. A storm was forming directly above the building, snow and rain mixing with bolts of silver lightning that had no natural source. "That's it," Lola encouraged. "I can see her head. She's crowning." "One more big push, Ruth. One more." The wolf inside Ruth roared, fighting against Travis's containment. Ruth felt her back arch, felt fur trying to burst through her skin. She was losing control. "Ruth," Travis's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay with me. Look at me. You are stronger than your wolf. You are stronger than this pain. Your daughter needs you. Now push." Ruth pushed. Serafina was born in an explosion of light and sound that shook the entire citadel. Every window in the building shattered simultaneously. The protective wards flared so bright they were visible for miles. And from the newborn's mouth came not a cry, but a sound that was half human wail, half wolf howl. "She's here," Lola breathed, holding up the baby. "Ruth, your daughter is here." Ruth's vision was blurring, but she could see her. Serafina was tiny, impossibly tiny, covered in blood and glowing with a soft silver light. Her eyes opened, and they were pure molten gold, just like Ruth's had been during the transformation. "Let me hold her," Ruth gasped, reaching out with shaking hands. Lola placed the baby on Ruth's chest. Serafina's tiny fist immediately grabbed Ruth's finger, holding tight with surprising strength. And in that moment, Ruth felt it. The bond. Not the fragile thing that had connected her to Christopher, but something infinitely stronger. A connection that went soul deep, that tied her to this tiny creature so completely that Ruth knew she would burn the world to ash before she let anyone hurt her. My daughter, Ruth thought, tears streaming down her face. My miracle. Seraphina's golden eyes focused on her mother's face. Her tiny mouth opened, and she spoke. Not a cry, not a whimper. A word. Mama. Travis froze. Lola gasped, her hands going to her mouth. She's 2 minutes old, Lola whispered. That's impossible. But Seraphina's eyes were already closing, exhaustion taking her. She nestled against Ruth's chest, her breathing evening out into sleep. Ruth looked up at Travis, who was staring at the baby with an expression of pure awe. What is she? Ruth whispered. Travis was quiet for a long moment. Then, she's the prophecy. The child who will either unite the werewolf kingdoms or destroy them all. He met Ruth's eyes, and she just spoke her first word at 2 minutes old. Ruth, I think she's going to be more powerful than any silver wolf in history. Good, Ruth said fiercely, holding her daughter closer. Let them be afraid. Let them all be afraid. Because somewhere south, in the court that had tried to kill them both, Ruth knew Christopher and the others were feeling the storm. They had no idea what was coming, but they would learn. Chapter 7, Mother's Wrath. 3 days passed in a blur of exhaustion and wonder. Ruth barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she startled awake, convinced someone was trying to take Seraphina. The rational part of her brain knew they were safe in the northern citadel, protected by Travis and his guards. But the wolf inside her, the mother inside her, trusted no one. Seraphina was extraordinary, in ways that went beyond her miraculous birth. She didn't cry like normal infants. When she was hungry, her eyes would glow softly, and Ruth would feel a gentle tug in her chest. A wordless communication between mother and child. When she slept, which was often, the temperature in the room would rise by several degrees, as if the baby radiated her own internal warmth. And she was growing, visibly, impossibly. She's doubled in size since birth, Lola said on the 3rd morning, measuring the infant with careful hands. At this rate, she'll look 3 months old by the end of the week. Is that normal? Ruth asked, cradling Seraphina against her chest. The baby's golden eyes were open, tracking movement in the room with an intelligence that was deeply unsettling. For silver wolves? Yes, and no. Lola sat back, her expression troubled. The legends speak of accelerated growth in the first months of life, but I've never seen it this fast. Ruth, your daughter isn't just powerful. She's something unprecedented. A knock at the door interrupted them. Travis entered, his expression grim in a way Ruth hadn't seen before. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Ruth's arms tightened around Seraphina. What kind of problem? The kind with an army. Travis moved to the window, gesturing for Ruth to join him. She did, and her blood ran cold. In the valley below the citadel, at least 200 wolves were gathered. Even from this distance, Ruth could see the banners they carried, the crescent moon symbol of the lunar court. Christopher, Ruth whispered, and Francis, and half the court's fighting force. Travis's jaw was tight. They arrived an hour ago under a flag of parley. They're demanding I surrender you. And the child. On what grounds? Lola asked sharply. They claim Ruth stole something from the court. Ancient texts from the Keeper's archives. Travis's eyes met Ruth's. It's a lie, obviously, but it gives them legal justification to pursue you across territorial lines. Ruth's wolf snarled inside her chest. They want to take her. They want to take Seraphina. They want leverage, Travis corrected. Now that they know what you are, what she is, they're trying to control the situation. If they can force you back to the court, they can dictate terms. Probably try to arrange a political marriage. Use your bloodline to strengthen their position. I'll kill them first, Ruth said flatly. Travis studied her for a moment. You're still recovering from childbirth. Your wolf is powerful, but you don't know how to use her yet. If you go down there right now, they'll overwhelm you through sheer numbers. Then what do we do? Hide? Run? Ruth felt her teeth lengthening. felt the familiar burn of transformation starting to simmer under her skin. I won't let them near my daughter, and you won't have to. Travis's voice carried absolute certainty. I told them I'd meet them in 1 hour. I'll handle this. How? By reminding them who I am. His amber eyes flashed with something predatory. By making it very clear what happens to anyone who threatens my ward. Before Ruth could respond, Serafina made a sound. Not quite a cry, but a whimper of distress. Her tiny hands clutched at Ruth's shirt, and her golden eyes were locked on the window, on the army below. She knows, Ruth breathed. She can sense the danger. Travis stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Serafina's head. The baby's eyes found his, and for a moment, they seemed to communicate in a way Ruth couldn't understand. Then Serafina relaxed, her grip loosening. Stay here, Travis commanded Ruth. Keep the doors locked. Lola will stay with you. He moved toward the door, then paused. If something goes wrong, if you hear fighting, if the wards start to fail, take Serafina and run. There's a passage behind the bookshelf. It leads to the mountain tunnels. Follow them north for 3 miles until you reach the river. My people will be waiting. Travis, promise me, he insisted. Promise me you'll run if it comes to that. Ruth wanted to argue, to insist she could fight, that she wouldn't abandon him. But Serafina whimpered again, and Ruth's priorities crystallized with absolute clarity. I promise, she said. Travis nodded and left. The hour passed like torture. Ruth paced the room. Serafina held tight against her chest, while Lola watched from the window. The healer provided a running commentary on what was happening below, though Ruth wasn't sure she wanted to hear it. King Travis is meeting them at the valley entrance. Christopher is there, and Francis, and, oh goddess. What? Ruth demanded. Hattie is with them. Lola's voice was tight. And she's carrying something. A box. Silver. Covered in runes. Ruth felt her stomach drop. What kind of box? I don't know, but whatever's inside is making the air shimmer. Powerful magic. Lola pressed closer to the window. They're talking now. Travis looks angry. Very angry. Ruth could imagine. Travis was powerful, but he was also political. He'd been trying to maintain peace between the territories for decades. This kind of direct challenge to his authority, this invasion of his lands, was an insult that couldn't be ignored. Christopher is saying something, Lola continued. Travis is. Oh no. What? Ruth's heart was hammering. He shifted. Travis just shifted. Even from inside the citadel, Ruth heard it. A roar that shook the mountain itself, that sent snow cascading down from the peaks in small avalanches. The windows rattled in their frames. They're fighting, Lola breathed. Travis versus Christopher, 1-on-1. Ruth wanted to look, needed to see, but she couldn't move toward the window. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to get Serafina away from here, to run like Travis had told her to, but she couldn't. Her legs wouldn't move, because Serafina was staring at the door with those unsettling golden eyes, and her tiny mouth was moving, forming shapes that looked almost like words. Lola, Ruth said carefully. Look at her. The healer turned, and her eyes widened. Is she trying to speak again? Serafina's mouth opened. Her voice, when it came, was still the high pitch of an infant, but the words were clear, unmistakable. They come. The doors to the chamber exploded inward. Not from outside, from the inside, as if something had detonated within the wood itself. Ruth threw herself over Serafina, shielding the baby with her body as splinters rained down around them. When she looked up, 3 figures stood in the doorway. They weren't court guards. They wore black leather, faces covered by silver masks carved into the shapes of snarling wolves, pure bloods. The fanatics who'd massacred Ruth's family. How did they get through the wards? Lola gasped, backing toward the window. One of the masked figures laughed. The box. Hattie's little gift. It disrupts magical barriers. Clever girl. For a court lapdog. The army was a distraction, Ruth realized with horror. They wanted Travis outside so these 3 could collect what belongs to us, the figure interrupted. He pointed at Serafina. The abomination. The corruption of the bloodline. She should have died with the rest of her kind, 20 years ago. Ruth felt her wolf surge forward, no longer content to stay contained. "You will not touch my daughter. We won't have to," the figure said. "You're going to give her to us, or we'll kill you both and take her corpse. Either way, the prophecy ends here." He lunged. Ruth's transformation happened in a heartbeat. One moment she was human, cradling her infant daughter. The next, she was silver fur and rage. 8 feet of predatory fury, with Serafina somehow still clutched safely against her chest, protected by a layer of luminescent fur that had formed a natural cradle. The pure blood's claws raked across Ruth's shoulder. She felt blood, felt pain, but it was distant, unimportant. They had threatened her child. Ruth's jaws closed on the pure blood's arm. She didn't just bite. She tore, ripping the limb clean off at the shoulder. Blood sprayed across the obsidian walls. The man's scream was cut short when Ruth's other paw smashed into his chest, caving in his ribs. He dropped, gurgling, dying. The other 2 pure bloods attacked simultaneously, one going high, one going low, trying to separate Ruth from the baby. But Ruth had already learned from her fight with Christopher. She was faster now, more controlled. She spun, using her tail as a weapon, the tip catching one attacker across the face hard enough to snap his neck. The third pure blood managed to get behind her, his claws sinking into her hind leg. Ruth roared, the sound shattering what remained of the windows. She twisted impossibly fast, her jaws closing on the male's throat. She didn't let go until his struggles stopped. 3 bodies, 3 dead pure bloods. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. Ruth shifted back to human form, Serafina still cradled safely against her chest. The baby was crying now, genuine infant tears, traumatized by the violence even if she'd been physically protected. "Shh," Ruth soothed, rocking her daughter. "It's okay. Mama's here. I've got you." Lola was pressed against the far wall, staring at Ruth with wide eyes. Not fear, exactly. Something more like awe. "You killed them," the healer whispered. 3 trained assassins. While protecting an infant, in 30 seconds. Ruth looked down at the bodies, at the blood covering her naked skin, and felt nothing. No guilt, no horror, just grim satisfaction. "They threatened my daughter," Ruth said simply. What did they expect? A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Travis burst through the destroyed doorway, still in wolf form, his dark fur matted with blood. When he saw the bodies, he shifted back to human, his expression stunned. "What happened?" he demanded. "Pure bloods," Ruth said. "They used some kind of device to break through the wards, but they're dead now." Travis looked at the bodies, then at Ruth, then back at the bodies. "You killed all 3? They wanted to take Serafina." Ruth's voice was flat. "Final." I explained why that wasn't going to happen. For a moment Travis just stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't kind. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another apex hunter. "The court army is retreating," he said. "After I killed Christopher's beta and crippled 2 of Francis's best fighters, they decided discretion was the better part of valor. But Ruth," he gestured to the carnage around them, "this changes things. When word gets out that you killed 3 pure bloods while protecting a newborn, every faction on the continent is going to be watching you. Let them watch," Ruth said. She looked down at Serafina, whose golden eyes were already drying, whose tiny fist was wrapped around Ruth's finger with that impossible strength. "Let them all know what happens when they threaten my family." Travis's smile widened. "Good, because what comes next is going to require that kind of fury." "What comes next?" Ruth asked. "We take back what's yours," Travis said. "Your territories, your title, your birthright." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "Ruth Argentum, it's time to stop hiding, time to stop running, time to show the werewolf world what a silver wolf can really do." Ruth looked at the bodies again, at the blood on her hands, at her daughter sleeping peacefully despite the violence. "When do we start?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Travis said. "Tomorrow, we begin your coronation." Chapter 8. The Paternity Revelation. The coronation preparations took 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which Serafina grew at an alarming rate, now appearing roughly 6 months old despite being barely 16 days since birth. She could sit up on her own, track movement with eerie precision, and her vocabulary had expanded to a dozen words, all spoken with that unsettling clarity that made everyone who heard her deeply uncomfortable. 2 weeks during which messengers arrived daily from every pack on the continent, some pledging support, others making veiled threats, all demanding to see proof that Ruth was truly Argentum. And 2 weeks during which Christopher sent 3 separate letters, each more desperate than the last, begging for an audience. Ruth burned them all without reading past the first lines. "You're going to have to face him eventually," Travis said on the morning of the coronation. They stood in the Citadel's war room, reviewing the final arrangements. "He'll be at the ceremony. Protocol demands it. He's still an alpha, still controls territory that borders yours." "I don't have to do anything," Ruth replied, adjusting the silver circlet that rested on her head. It was a temporary crown, a placeholder, until the formal coronation that evening when she'd receive the full Argentum diadem. "I can have him removed." "You could," Travis agreed. "But that would make you look weak. Like you're still afraid of him." Ruth's eyes flashed gold. "I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid I'll kill him in front of witnesses." Travis's lips quirked. "That would certainly make a statement." A soft coo drew their attention. Serafina sat in a specially designed high chair near the fire, playing with a set of carved wooden blocks. As they watched, she stacked 3 blocks with careful precision, then looked up at Ruth with those golden eyes. "Mama, look." "I see, baby," Ruth said, moving to her daughter's side. "Very good." Serafina smiled a real, genuine smile that transformed her eerily mature face into something briefly childlike. Then she pushed the blocks over and giggled at the clatter. "She's remarkable," Travis said quietly. "I've never seen a silver wolf child develop this quickly. The legend spoke of accelerated growth, but this..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Is she normal?" Ruth asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her chest. "For our bloodline, I mean? Or is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Travis assured her. "But I think her father's bloodline is influencing her development, mixing with yours in unexpected ways." Ruth's jaw tightened. "Christopher's bloodline isn't anything special. He's just an alpha." "Is he?" Travis interrupted gently. "Ruth, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. When you were with Christopher, did you notice anything unusual? Any abilities beyond standard alpha traits?" Ruth was quiet for a moment, remembering. He could compel obedience even from betas who weren't in his direct pack. "I saw him do it once, force a visiting beta to kneel just by speaking a command. Francis said it was a sign of a strong alpha bloodline. Or a hidden one," Travis muttered. He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a thick leather-bound book, flipping through pages covered in dense text and hand-drawn family trees. "Do you know Christopher's mother's maiden name?" "No, he never talked about her. She died when he was young." Travis found the page he was looking for and turned the book toward Ruth. "Christopher Hudson, son of Richard Hudson, former alpha of the Lunar Court Territories, and Carolyn Washington." Ruth stared at the name. "Washington? I don't recognize that family." "You wouldn't. They were purged 30 years ago, around the same time as the Argentum line." Travis's expression was grave. The Washington bloodline carried the gift of compulsion, the ability to control other wolves through voice alone. They were considered dangerous, too powerful to be allowed to exist alongside normal packs. "You're saying Christopher has Washington blood?" "Diluted, but yes. His mother must have hidden her heritage, married into the Hudson line to escape notice." Travis closed the book. "Which means Serafina carries not just silver wolf power, but Washington compulsion abilities. That's why she's developing so fast, speaking so early. She's trying to master 2 separate magical inheritances simultaneously." Ruth felt dizzy. "So Christopher is..." "What? Part of another extinct bloodline?" "A quarter Washington at most. His mother was likely half-blood, trying to escape her family's fate." Travis met Ruth's eyes. "But Ruth, this is important. If the purebloods find out Serafina carries Washington blood on top of Argentum, they'll redouble their efforts to kill her. 2 forbidden bloodlines in one child, that's their worst nightmare. Then we don't tell them," Ruth said fiercely. "We may not have a choice." Travis gestured to the window. "Because Christopher is here. He arrived an hour ago, and he brought someone with him." Someone who claims to have proof of Serafina's paternity. The throne room of the northern citadel had been transformed for the coronation. Hundreds of candles cast flickering light across banners representing every major pack on the continent. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat the argentum throne carved from a single piece of white stone, inlaid with silver in patterns that seemed to move in the candlelight. Ruth stood in the antechamber, dressed in a gown of white silk with silver embroidery that depicted wolves running beneath a full moon. Serafina was in her arms, dressed in a matching miniature gown, looking far too aware of the ceremony's significance for a 16-day-old infant. "Ready?" Travis asked. He wore formal regalia, black and silver, the colors of the Northern Kingdom, and looked every inch the Alpha King. "No," Ruth admitted. "But let's do this anyway." The doors opened. A herald's voice rang out. Her Majesty Ruth Argentum, last of the Silver Wolf line, and her daughter Princess Serafina Argentum. Ruth walked forward, her head high, Serafina held against her chest. The assembled crowd, at least 300 wolves from dozens of different packs, turned to watch. She could feel their stares, their judgment, their fear. And there, near the front, stood Christopher. He looked terrible, thinner than she remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted expression. Hattie stood beside him, her hand on his arm, but Christopher wasn't looking at his fiancée. His eyes were locked on Ruth and the baby in her arms. Ruth forced herself to look away, focusing on the dais. Francis was there, representing the lunar court, along with several other elders. The keeper of records stood beside the throne, holding an ancient crown on a velvet cushion. Travis took his place at the base of the dais as Ruth ascended the steps. When she reached the top, she turned to face the crowd, Serafina still in her arms. "We are gathered," the keeper began in his dry, ancient voice, "to witness the restoration of the Argentum bloodline, to crown Ruth Argentum as Queen of the Silver Territories, and to acknowledge her daughter Serafina as heir to the throne. I object." Christopher's voice cut through the ceremony like a knife. The crowd gasped. Even Travis looked surprised. "You cannot object to a coronation," Francis said sharply. "This isn't a trial, Alpha Christopher." "I'm not objecting to the coronation," Christopher said, stepping forward. His voice shook slightly, but his eyes were clear, determined. "I'm objecting to the child's designation as daughter of no father. Because she does have a father. And he's standing right here." The throne room erupted in whispers. Ruth felt her heart stop. "Christopher, don't," Hattie hissed, grabbing his arm. He shook her off. "I've been a coward. I've been a fool. But I won't let my daughter be declared fatherless when I'm standing right here." He looked directly at Ruth, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Ruth, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong to reject you, wrong to deny Serafina, wrong about everything, but I'm here now, and I'm claiming my daughter." "You have no right," Ruth said, her voice cold as winter. "You rejected us. You threw us away. You don't get to change your mind now that you know what we are." "I know," Christopher said, moving closer to the dais. "I know I have no right, but she's my blood. Ruth. I can feel it, and she deserves to know her father." "Does she?" Ruth's laugh was bitter. "What will you tell her, Christopher? That you called her mother trash? That you tried to have us exiled to die in the winter? That you got engaged to another woman while I was carrying your child?" "I'll tell her the truth," Christopher said quietly. "That I was a coward who valued pride over love. And that I've regretted it every day since." "Enough," Travis said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Alpha Christopher, if you're claiming paternity, we can perform a blood test. Here, now. The keeper has the necessary tools." "Wait," Hattie said desperately. She reached into her gown and pulled out a small vial of dark liquid. "Before you do that, you need to see this." Travis's expression darkened. "What is that?" "A truth serum," Hattie said. Her voice had lost its usual mocking tone, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. "I had it prepared by our court's alchemist. 1 drop, and whoever drinks it cannot lie for 1 hour." "Why would we need that?" Francis demanded. "Because," Hattie said, looking directly at Ruth, "I'm not sure Christopher is the only one who's been lying." Ruth felt ice flood her veins. What are you talking about? The night before Christopher rejected you, Hattie said carefully. I saw you in the corridors. Late. Very late. And you weren't alone. I was with Christopher, Ruth said. Were you? Hattie's eyes glittered. Because the male I saw leaving your room didn't move like Christopher. He was taller, broader, and when I followed his scent trail, it didn't lead to Christopher's quarters. It led to the guest wing, to the room where King Travis was staying during his diplomatic visit. The silence that followed was absolute. Ruth felt everyone's eyes on her. Christopher looked like he'd been punched. Travis's expression was carefully neutral, and in Ruth's arms, Serafina, who had been quiet throughout the entire ceremony, chose that moment to reach out with one tiny hand toward Travis. Da, she said clearly. Da. The throne room exploded into chaos. That's impossible, Frances sputtered. King Travis wasn't even at court 3 months ago. I was, Travis said quietly. All eyes swung to him. I made an unofficial visit, stayed one night. I was investigating reports of a silver wolf survivor, but I left before confirming anything. Christopher stared at Ruth. Betrayal written across his face. You were with both of us? No, Ruth said desperately. Christopher, I swear, I was only with you. I never touched Travis. Then explain why my daughter just called him father. Christopher snarled. She's confused. Ruth insisted. She's just a baby. She's a silver wolf who can speak in full sentences at 16 days old. The keeper interrupted. His clouded eyes were studying Serafina with disturbing intensity. They don't make mistakes about things like parentage. If she called him father, then let's prove it, Travis said. He descended the dais and held out his hand to Christopher. Blood test. Both of us, right now, will know definitively who fathered Serafina. Christopher nodded sharply. Agreed. The keeper moved forward with a silver knife and 2 crystal vials. He made quick, shallow cuts on both males' palms, collecting blood in the vials. Then he approached Ruth. I need a drop of the child's blood, he said gently. Ruth wanted to refuse, wanted to grab Serafina and run. But Travis was right, they needed to know the truth. She held out her daughter's tiny hand. The keeper made the smallest possible nick on Serafina's finger. The baby didn't even flinch, just watched with those unsettling golden eyes as a single drop of blood fell into a 3rd vial. The keeper combined all 3 samples in a larger crystal bowl. He added something that glowed faintly blue, then began to chant in a language Ruth didn't recognize. The blood began to shimmer, separate, reform into distinct patterns. When the magic cleared, 2 distinct lines glowed in the bowl. One connected Serafina's blood to Christopher's. The other connected her blood to Travis's. Impossible, the keeper breathed. She has 2 fathers. Chapter 9. The 3 Kings Trial. The throne room descended into absolute pandemonium. 2 fathers? Francis was on his feet, his voice cutting through the chaos. That's biologically impossible. Someone has tampered with this test. The keeper doesn't make mistakes, Travis said, his voice deadly calm despite the shock written across his face. He was staring at the glowing blood patterns in the crystal bowl, as if they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. But I agree this shouldn't be possible. Ruth, I need you to think very carefully. The night you conceived, was there any unusual magic in your room? Any spells, potions, anything out of the ordinary? Ruth's mind was spinning. She clutched Serafina tighter, the baby watching everything with those knowing golden eyes. I don't understand. Christopher, you were the only one. I swear to you, I never. She's lying, Hattie spat. Obviously she was with both of them and doesn't want to admit. She's not lying. The keeper's voice silenced everyone. He was bent over the crystal bowl, studying the blood patterns with those clouded eyes that saw too much. Look at the bonding signatures. They're identical in formation time. Both males contributed to conception on the same night, at the same hour, possibly the same moment. That's insane, Christopher said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was staring at Ruth with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been hope. How could that happen? Argentum bloodline magic, the keeper said slowly, pieces clicking together. Silver wolves have an ancient defense mechanism when they're in extreme danger. When their bloodline is on the verge of extinction, their body can harvest genetic material from multiple compatible sources to ensure the strongest possible offspring. He looked at Ruth. Did you feel threatened the night you conceived? Were you afraid? Ruth thought back to that night 3 months ago. Christopher had come to her room late, smelling of whiskey and regret. He'd told her they couldn't keep meeting, that the council was pressuring him to choose a proper mate. She'd known it was their last time together. And yes, she'd been terrified. Terrified of being alone. Terrified of losing the one person who'd made her feel like she mattered. I was afraid, Ruth whispered. Christopher told me it was over between us, that he was going to announce his engagement to Hattie the next week. I thought that was the last time I'd ever feel wanted. And earlier that day, Travis said quietly, understanding dawning in his amber eyes, I visited the court. We spoke briefly in the corridors. You asked me about the Silver Wolf legends, if I thought any might still be alive. I told you there was hope, that survivors might exist in hiding. Ruth nodded. You were kind to me, one of the only people who'd ever treated me like I was worth speaking to. I remember thinking. She trailed off, embarrassed. Thinking what? Travis prompted gently. That if I had to be an Omega, at least there were alphas like you in the world. Ones who didn't look at me like I was trash. Ruth's voice was barely above a whisper. That night with Christopher, when I knew it was ending, some part of me must have wanted what I couldn't have. Wanted someone who'd actually value me. So your bloodline magic reached out, the keeper finished. When Christopher's seed entered your womb, your silver wolf instincts recognized him as genetically compatible but emotionally unsuitable. So your magic reached across the miles, found the nearest compatible male who'd treated you with respect, King Travis, and pulled his genetic contribution as well. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, Hattie said. But she sounded uncertain now. It's documented, the keeper countered. There are 3 recorded cases in Argentum history. Always in times of extreme duress. Always when the bloodline was threatened. The body's magic ensures the child carries the strongest possible traits from multiple fathers. He gestured to Serafina. Look at her. She has Christopher's facial structure but Travis's amber undertones in her eyes. She's growing at an accelerated rate even for a silver wolf that's Christopher's Washington bloodline, mixing with Travis's royal magic and Ruth's Argentum power. She's the result of 3 of the most powerful bloodlines on the continent, combining into one child. Christopher sank into a nearby chair, his face pale. So she's mine. And his. Equally. Which makes this a legal nightmare, Francis said grimly. 2 fathers means 2 claims to paternity, 2 different bloodline rights, 2 potential kingdoms that could claim the child as heir. She's not a bargaining chip, Ruth snarled, her eyes flashing gold. She's my daughter, and no one is claiming her for political purposes. Ruth, Travis interrupted carefully. In werewolf law, if a child has 2 recognized fathers, both have equal rights to claim the child. Christopher is an alpha, with his own territories. I'm a king with mine. If we both assert our paternal rights. He didn't finish the sentence. War, the keeper said flatly. It would mean war between your territories. The continent would be forced to choose sides. Unless, Francis said slowly, an idea clearly forming, there was a different solution. An older solution. One that predates modern pack law. All eyes turned to him. The trial of kings, Francis continued. An ancient custom used when multiple males claimed the same mate or child. 3 trials of different natures: combat, wisdom, and sacrifice. The winner earns the right to claim the child and the mother. No, Ruth said immediately. Absolutely not. I'm not a prize to be won. But your daughter needs protection, Francis interrupted. Ruth, whether you like it or not, Serafina's very existence is a threat to the established order. 2 forbidden bloodlines, 3 royal inheritances, and more power than any infant should possess. If you don't establish clear legal paternity, every pack on the continent will be fighting over her. But if she has 1 recognized father, 1 clear line of succession, the political situation stabilizes. Ruth wanted to argue, but she could see the truth in his words. Even now, she could feel the eyes of the crowd calculating, scheming, seeing Serafina as a tool rather than a child. "I'll do it," Christopher said, standing up. His voice was stronger now, more certain. "If it means protecting Ruth and Serafina, if it means making up for what I did, I'll face the trials." "As will I," Travis said. "Though I hope you realize, Christopher, that I have decades more experience and considerably more power." "Then let's make it interesting," a third voice said from the back of the throne room. Everyone turned. A figure stepped from the shadows, a male Ruth didn't recognize. He was older than Christopher but younger than Travis, perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with a predator's grace, and the power radiating from him made several nearby wolves instinctively step back. "Who are you?" Travis demanded. "Bobby Hicks," the stranger said with a slight bow. "Alpha of the Western Territories. And I'm here to make a formal claim for Ruth Argentum's hand and guardianship of her daughter." The room exploded with shocked voices. "You can't just walk in and claim a woman you've never met," Francis sputtered. "Why not?" Bobby's smile was sharp. "The trial is for any male who wishes to claim the mother and child, is it not? I heard the proclamation. I meet the requirements. I'm an unmated alpha. I have territories and resources to provide for them, and I'm willing to face the trials." He looked directly at Ruth. "And unlike these two, I have no history of hurting you, no rejection to apologize for, just a genuine desire to protect the most powerful bloodline in existence." "This is absurd," Christopher said. "You don't even know her." "Neither did Travis, when he supposedly fathered her child," Bobby countered. "At least I'm being honest about my motivations. I want an alliance with the Argentum line. I want the protection that comes with having a silver wolf as my mate. I'm offering a business arrangement, which is more honest than whatever romantic delusions you two are operating under." Travis's expression had gone cold. "If you think you can win Ruth through the trials just to treat her as a political asset, I think," Bobby interrupted, "that Ruth deserves to have all her options before her, including one that doesn't come with complicated emotional baggage." He met Ruth's eyes. "I'll be a good father to your daughter. I'll give you the respect and status you deserve. And I'll never throw you away because you don't meet someone else's standards. That's my offer." Ruth stared at him. This stranger who'd just walked into her coronation and upended everything. Part of her wanted to refuse all of them, to declare that she needed no male, no father for Serafina, no protector but herself. But she'd seen the purebloods attack. She'd felt how exhausted she was from giving birth and transforming. She'd heard the whispers in the crowd how many packs saw Serafina as a threat to be eliminated. She needed allies, whether she liked it or not. "Fine," Ruth said, her voice cutting through the arguing. "The trial of kings. All three of you. But understand this." Her eyes flashed gold as she looked at each male in turn. "I'm not a prize. I'm not a political asset. And I'm not some helpless Omega who needs saving. Whoever wins these trials doesn't win me. They win the right to stand beside me as I rule. The right to help protect our daughter. But I will always be her mother first, and I will always be the one who decides what's best for her. Agreed?" Christopher nodded immediately. Travis inclined his head in acknowledgement. Bobby smiled and bowed. "When do we begin?" Christopher asked. Francis consulted with the keeper in hushed whispers, then turned back to the assembly. "Traditionally, the trial of kings takes place over 3 days. 1 trial per day. The first trial combat will be held tomorrow at dawn. The second trial wisdom at noon the following day. The final trial sacrifice will occur on the 3rd evening." He paused. "However, given the unusual circumstances, there will be modifications. The combat trial will be 3-way, all males fighting simultaneously. Last one standing wins that round. The wisdom trial will test your knowledge of Silver Wolf history and law. And the sacrifice trial will test what you're willing to give up for the child." The keeper finished. "Be warned, the sacrifice trial has broken stronger males than any of you. It will demand more than you think you can give." "I understand," Christopher said. "As do I," Travis agreed. "Can't be worse than what I've already survived," Bobby added with dark humor. "Then it's settled," Francis announced. "The trial of kings begins at dawn. Prepare yourselves, gentlemen. Only one of you will emerge as Serafina's recognized father and Ruth's chosen mate." Ruth looked down at Serafina, who was watching the 3 males with those unsettling golden eyes. The baby's tiny hand reached out, pointing at each male in turn, as if measuring them. Then Serafina looked up at Ruth and smiled. "Mama strong," she said clearly. "No need daddies." Despite everything, despite the insanity of her situation, Ruth laughed. "That's right, baby. But maybe we can use them anyway." Because Ruth was beginning to understand something important. The males could fight over who got to stand beside her throne. But the throne itself? That belonged to her alone. And she was going to make sure everyone, including these 3 would-be fathers, remembered that. Chapter 10. The Coronation of Blood. Dawn broke cold and merciless over the northern citadel. Ruth stood at the window of her chambers. Serafina sleeping peacefully in a cradle lined with silver-threaded silk. The baby had grown again overnight, now appearing almost a year old, with a full head of silver-blonde hair and features that were heartbreakingly beautiful. She'd spoken 12 new words before falling asleep, including a disturbingly accurate assessment of Bobby's fake smile. Below, in the Valley Arena, preparations were underway for the first trial. Ruth could see the 3 males warming up in separate areas, each surrounded by their supporters. Christopher with his Lunar Court delegation, Travis with his Northern warriors, Bobby with a smaller but clearly elite group of Western fighters. "You don't have to watch," Lola said quietly from behind her. The healer had become Ruth's constant companion, equal parts medical advisor and friend. "It's going to be brutal." "I know." Ruth's hand pressed against the cold glass. "But they're fighting because of me, because of Serafina. I owe them the respect of witnessing it." "Do you have a preference?" Lola asked carefully. "For who wins?" Ruth was quiet for a long moment. "Christopher is Serafina's biological father. Part of me wants him to win just so she can know him. But he hurt me so badly, Lola. I don't know if I can ever trust him again. And Travis? Travis saved us, protected us. But he's also politically complicated. If I mate with him, it creates a power block that would terrify every other territory. Plus, there's the weirdness of him being Serafina's father through magic rather than actual." Ruth trailed off, blushing. "And Bobby?" Lola's tone suggested what she thought of the Western Alpha. "Bobby is honest about wanting power. At least I know where I stand with him. No romantic complications, no pretense of love. Just a business arrangement." Ruth sighed. "Maybe that's better, cleaner. Or maybe," Lola said gently, "you don't have to choose any of them. Maybe you rule alone, take lovers as you please, and raise Serafina to be the queen she's destined to become without male interference." Ruth smiled at that. "In a perfect world, yes. But this isn't a perfect world. And Serafina needs protection I can't provide alone." "Not yet." A knock at the door interrupted them. Travis entered, already dressed for combat in flexible leather armor that would allow easy transformation. His amber eyes found Ruth's immediately. "I wanted to see you before the trial," he said. "To make sure you understand whatever happens today. I meant what I said. You and Serafina are under my protection. Whether I win or lose." "Travis," Ruth began. "Let me finish." He moved closer, his presence filling the room. "I know this situation is insane. I know I'm as much a stranger to you as Bobby is. But Ruth, from the moment I found you in that hall, covered in blood and protecting your daughter, I knew you were extraordinary. Not because of your bloodline, because of your strength." "Pretty words," Ruth said, her voice harder than she intended. "But you're still a male fighting for ownership of me." "No." Travis's voice was firm. "I'm fighting for the right to stand beside you. There's a difference. If I win, you'll still rule. You'll still make every decision regarding Serafina. I'll be your partner, not your master. I swear it on my bloodline and the moon herself." Before Ruth could respond, another knock. Christopher entered, looking haggard, but determined. He stopped when he saw Travis, tension crackling between the 2 males. "I need a moment with Ruth," Christopher said. "Alone. You have no right to demand anything from her," Travis replied coldly. "Stop." Ruth's voice cut through their posturing. "Travis, thank you for your words. I'll consider them. Now please, give us privacy." Travis looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded and left. Christopher waited until the door closed before speaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly. I don't even expect you to believe me when I say I'm sorry. But Ruth, I need you to know I loved you. I was just too much of a coward to admit it until it was too late. You rejected me in front of the entire court, Ruth said flatly. You called me nothing. You tried to have me exiled to die while pregnant with your child. Don't you dare stand here and tell me you loved me. I know. Christopher's voice cracked. I know what I did, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. But I'm here now. I'm fighting for you, for Serafina. And if I win, I'll spend every day proving that I've changed. People don't change, Christopher. They just get better at hiding who they really are. Then watch me, he said desperately. Give me a chance to prove you wrong. Please. Ruth wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him that some wounds cut too deep to heal. But then Serafina stirred in her cradle, her golden eyes opening to focus on Christopher. The baby studied him for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she pushed herself up on tiny hands and stood 16 days old and standing on her own, defying every law of normal development. Dada, Serafina said, reaching toward Christopher. Christopher's face crumpled. He moved toward the cradle, stopping just short, looking to Ruth for permission. She nodded once, grudgingly. Christopher picked up his daughter for the first time. Serafina wrapped her small arms around his neck, and Christopher's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I'm so sorry, he whispered to the baby. I'm so sorry I wasn't there, that I hurt your mother. But I'm here now, little one. I'm here. Ruth felt tears burning her own eyes. Damn him for making this complicated. The trial starts in 30 minutes, she said, her voice hoarse. You should go prepare. Christopher nodded, reluctantly handing Serafina back to Ruth. I'll win, he said with sudden intensity. I'll win because I have to. Because you and Serafina deserve better than what I gave you. And I'm going to be that male. I swear it. He left before Ruth could respond. The arena was a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside, with seating for over 1,000 wolves. Every seat was filled. News of the trial of kings had spread across the continent overnight, 3 alphas fighting for the right to claim the Silver Wolf Queen and her miracle child. It was the stuff of legends. Ruth sat in the royal box, Serafina on her lap, Travis's guards surrounding them. Francis and the other elders sat nearby, ready to officiate. The crowd's excitement was palpable, a living thing that made the air hum with tension. The first trial combat will now begin, Francis announced, his voice magically amplified. 3 males enter. Only one may emerge victorious. The rules are simple. No weapons, no outside interference. Fight until only one remains standing. Killing blows are permitted, though not encouraged. The 3 males entered from opposite sides of the arena. The crowd roared. Shift at will, Francis continued. May the strongest male prove his worth. Begin. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. The males circled each other, assessing, calculating. Then Bobby attacked. He went straight for Travis, the biggest threat, shifting mid-leap into a massive gray wolf. Travis barely had time to transform, his own dark wolf form meeting Bobby's in midair with a collision that shook the ground. Christopher used the distraction to shift and circle, looking for an opening. His black wolf was smaller than the other 2, but faster, more agile. The fight was brutal from the start. Bobby's Western fighting style was all aggression, no defense, his jaws snapping for Travis's throat again and again. Travis fought with cold precision, using his superior size to pin Bobby, but the Western alpha was slippery, twisting free every time. Christopher waited, patient, letting them tire each other out. Smart, Ruth thought grudgingly. He was outmatched in raw power, so he was using strategy. Travis finally gained the upper hand, his jaws closing on Bobby's shoulder. Bobby howled in pain, blood staining the arena floor. He kicked desperately, claws raking Travis's face, and broke free. That's when Christopher struck. He hit Travis from the side, full force, sending the larger wolf tumbling. Before Travis could recover, Christopher was on him, teeth seeking the vulnerable throat. But Travis was faster. He twisted impossibly, using Christopher's momentum against him, and suddenly Christopher was on his back with Travis's jaws hovering over his throat. Yield. Travis's mental voice echoed through the arena. Christopher's response was to rake his hind claws across Travis's belly, opening shallow wounds. Travis yelped and backed off, giving Christopher time to roll to his feet. Bobby rejoined the fight, clearly favoring his injured shoulder, but refusing to quit. All three wolves circled again, panting, bleeding, exhausted. This could go on for hours, Lola muttered beside Ruth. But then Serafina made a sound. Not quite a word, more like a musical note that carried across the arena despite the crowd noise. All three wolves froze, their heads turning toward the royal box, toward the baby who was watching them with those knowing golden eyes. Serafina raised one tiny hand and pointed at Christopher. "Dada hurt," she said clearly. "Dada bleeding." Ruth looked closer and saw what Serafina had noticed. Christopher was limping now, his right hind leg not bearing weight properly. He'd injured it, probably during that initial hit on Travis, and had been hiding it through sheer stubbornness. Travis saw it too. And Bobby. Both larger wolves turned their attention to the weakest target. "No," Ruth whispered. They attacked simultaneously, one from each side. Christopher tried to dodge, but his injured leg betrayed him. He went down hard, Bobby's jaws closing on his throat while Travis positioned to deliver the killing blow. "Stop!" Ruth's voice cracked across the arena like thunder, carrying power that made every wolf present, including the three fighters, freeze in place. She was on her feet, Serafina in her arms, her eyes blazing pure gold. She hadn't consciously given the command, but her silver wolf had taken over, refusing to watch Christopher die. "The trial is over," Ruth announced, her voice still carrying that supernatural authority. "I'm calling it." "You can't do that," Francis protested weakly. "The rules." "I'm the Silver Wolf Queen," Ruth interrupted, and her voice made Francis's alpha dominance seem like a candle next to the sun. "These are my trials, my males, my rules, and I say the combat trial is over." She descended from the royal box, walking across the arena floor with measured steps. The three males had shifted back to human form, all of them bleeding, exhausted, staring at her with a mixture of awe and confusion. Ruth stopped in the center, Serafina still in her arms. "You're all idiots," she said conversationally. "Fighting each other like this proves nothing, except that you're willing to die for pride." "Ruth," Travis began. "I'm not finished." Her eyes swept over all three of them. "You want to prove you're worthy to stand beside me? To help protect Serafina? Then prove it by working together. Because here's what you don't understand, she doesn't need one father. She has two biological fathers and a third male who's offering protection. Maybe instead of fighting over who gets to claim us, you should be figuring out how to share." "Share?" Bobby said incredulously. "You can't mate with three males." "Why not?" Ruth's smile was sharp. "The old laws allow it. A Silver Wolf Queen can take as many consorts as she wishes. You'd all have equal status, equal access to Serafina, equal responsibility for protecting our territories." The arena had gone deathly silent. This was unprecedented, unheard of, scandalous. "I'll do it," Christopher said immediately. "If it means being in my daughter's life, I'll share." Travis was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I swore to protect you both. If this is how you want that protection structured, I'll honor it." Bobby laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "You're insane. All of you." "But..." He looked at Serafina, who was watching him with those golden eyes. "Fine. I didn't come here expecting to fall in love anyway. A political arrangement with two other males? At least it'll be interesting." Ruth felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Unexpected, but real. "Then here are my terms," she said. "You will all swear loyalty to me, not to each other. You will never try to control my decisions or speak for me. You will protect Serafina with your lives. And most importantly," her voice hardened, "you will never, ever make me feel like I'm nothing again. Because I'm not nothing. I'm everything. And you're gonna spend the rest of your lives remembering that." She turned to Francis. "Cancel the remaining trials. I've made my choice. All three of them." Francis looked like he was going to have a stroke, but he nodded. "So be it." Ruth looked down at Serafina. "What do you think, baby, 3 daddies instead of 1? Serafina's face split into a radiant smile. "More daddies, more presents," she said pragmatically. Despite everything, Ruth laughed. Her daughter was going to be just fine. 3 months later, the coronation was finally completed on a clear autumn day. Ruth stood on the dais, wearing the full argentum crown, silver and moonstone, ancient and beautiful. Serafina, now appearing roughly 3 years old despite being 4 months since birth, stood beside her in a miniature crown of her own. Christopher, Travis, and Bobby stood at the base of the dais, wearing matching silver bands that marked them as the Queen's consorts. It had taken 3 months of negotiation, legal maneuvering, and more than a few shouting matches, but they'd made it work. "I present to you," Francis announced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd of thousands, "Queen Ruth Argentum, ruler of the Silver Territories, last of the ancient line, and her daughter, Princess Serafina, heir to the throne." The crowd erupted in cheers. Not everyone was happy about the arrangement. The scandal of 3 consorts would fuel gossip for decades, but no one could deny Ruth's power. She'd proven herself in battle, in politics, and in sheer force of will. Ruth looked out at the sea of faces, former enemies, new allies, curious observers, and felt something she'd never experienced before. Peace. "Mama?" Serafina tugged on her gown. "When do we eat cake?" Ruth smiled down at her daughter. "Soon, baby. First, Mama has to give a speech." "Boring," Serafina declared, but she settled against Ruth's side, content to wait. Ruth took a breath and addressed her kingdom. 3 years ago, I was nobody. An Omega scrubbing floors, invisible to everyone who mattered. Today, I'm your queen. That transformation didn't happen because of magic, or bloodline, or destiny. It happened because I refused to die quietly in the snow when they threw me away." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Every Omega in this kingdom who feels invisible, you're not. Every wolf who's been told they're too weak, too broken, too different, you're not. You are all descendants of survivors. Of fighters. And under my rule, no one will ever be thrown away again." The cheers were deafening. Ruth reached down and took Serafina's hand. Together, mother and daughter, they turned to face their 3 consorts. "Thank you," Ruth said softly, just loud enough for them to hear. "For fighting for us. For protecting us. For learning to share." Christopher knelt first, followed by Travis and Bobby. "We are yours, my queen," Christopher said, "now and always." Ruth looked at them, 3 powerful males on their knees before her, and thought about the girl she'd been. The one who'd thought love meant making herself small enough to fit into someone else's life. That girl was gone. In her place stood a queen. A mother. A force of nature. And the entire world was going to kneel before her silver wolf. Just as they should have from the beginning. So here's my question for you, dear viewers. If you were Ruth, could you ever truly forgive Christopher? Or are some betrayals too deep to come back from, even when he's kneeling at your feet as your consort? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if Ruth's transformation from invisible Omega to unstoppable queen gave you chills, show this story some love with a like. Thanks for experiencing this journey with me.